Hello, my name is Christina Pfluger, and this presentation is about forensic anthropology in the United States and Australia. I will examine the similarities and differences between the U.S. and Australia within the field of forensic anthropology. According to the American Board of forensic anthropology is the application of the science of physical or biological anthropology to the legal process. The analysis of unidentified skeletal human remains is important in both legal and humanitarian contexts. Forensic anthropologists apply standard scientific techniques developed in physical anthropology to analyze human remains and to aid in the detection of crime. In addition to assisting and locating and recovering human remains, forensic anthropologists work to assess the age, sex, ancestry, stature, and unique features of a decedent from the skeleton. Forensic anthropologists frequently work in conjunction with forensic anthropologists, odontologists, and homicide investigators to identify the decedent, document trauma to the skeleton, and/or estimate the post-mortem interval. The public views forensic anthropology as a young discipline, which it is. However, it has a long developmental history. There is no date for the beginning of the study of the human skeleton, but there is a date for the first use of skeletal information in a court of law, the Webster-Parkman trial of 1850. Thomas Dwight was named the father of forensic anthropology because he was the first to publish on the topic in 1878. Although forensic anthropology started up in Washington, D.C., not much was happening in the rest of the country. Forensic anthropology finally began to evolve as a recognizable discipline during the 1970s. In 1971, William Bass published the first practical textbook, Human Osteology, a Laboratory and Field Manual, that, in a later edition, is still used today. By the end of the 1970s, T. Dale Stewart published the first textbook to include the name Forensic Anthropology in its title. Forensic anthropology degree titles did not come around until the late 1980s and 90s, with the job title of forensic anthropologist being even newer. The American Board of Forensic Anthropology was incorporated in 1977 as a nonprofit organization to provide a program of certification in forensic anthropology. The Society of Forensic Anthropologists is a professional organization of over 40 practicing forensic anthropologists, which held its first meeting in 2003 during the American Board of Forensic Anthropology conference that year. Much like the U.S., forensic anthropology developed very slowly in Australia and has its roots in the anatomical sciences. Anatomists had an interest in the osteology of the Australian Aborigines because most of their collection to teach from were Aboriginal in nature. Early anatomists included Neil McIntosh of the University of Sydney, George Helford of the University of Melbourne, and Walter Wood of the University of Queensland, just to name a few. Unlike the U.S., Australia does not have a truly professional organization for forensic scientists, nor does it have a board of forensic anthropology. In Australia, there are two main associations to which people belong: the Australian Academy of Forensic Science and the Australian and New Zealand Forensic Science Society. The Australian Academy of Forensic Science was formed in 1967. It publishes the Australian Journal of Forensic Science, and although it does not hold a conference, it does hold a few lectures per year. The Australian and New Zealand Forensic Science Society was formed in 1971. The first session on forensic anthropology was in Sydney in 1996. Almost every symposium since '96 has had an anthropology session. Since the Vietnam War, all Australian war dead have been repatriated to Australia. To assist in identification of individuals from these circumstances, the disaster victim identification procedures were developed in 2004. These procedures follow the guidelines set out by Interpol and follow their standards. The four phases include the scene, post-mortem, ante-mortem, and the reconciliation. In Australia, the types of agencies requesting services of forensic anthropologists include the following: 64% the coroner's office and its associated Department of Forensic Medicine, 18% the police, 7% the Australian Defence Forces, 5% archaeologists, 5% heritage bodies like the Department of Environment and Conservation, and 1% private institutions. As of 2008, there are very few full-time forensic anthropologists employed in Australia, with approximately one per state or territory. With 9 states or territories, that is not many forensic anthropologists for the entire continent of Australia. This is in comparison to the just under 100 anthropologists who were certified diplomats of the American Board of Forensic Anthropology discussed earlier. I have discovered in my research on forensic anthropology in Australia that it is not well written about, and there are very little articles that I have been able to find in regards to an exact timeline like I was for the United States. I was able to find multiple articles, however, that discuss the need for Australian population-specific standards for human identification. Most of the human skeletal collections, including the Murray Black collection in Australia, are Aboriginal in nature. Many of these collections are beginning to diminish as their remains are slowly being repatriated back to the Aboriginal families. There is a lack of collections of non-Aboriginal skeletal remains in Australia, so they depend on the research of those assemblages from the U.S. There are two main skeletal collections used for research and analysis in the United States. The Robert K. Terry Anatomical Collection is housed in the Smithsonian Institution and is the most intensively studied research collection. There are 1,700 individuals now in this collection, which was assembled between 1898 and 1967. The second collection is the University of Tennessee William M. Bass Donated Skeletal Collection, which reflects the present-day American population. This collection holds 750 donated skeletal collections and is continuously growing. I believe the one big reason forensic anthropology is so big in the United States is because of the media's portrayal of the field. Many people get drawn in by the flashy appeal shown on shows like Bones and CSI. However, many learn that it's not for them once they see their first real set of remains. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed my presentation on the history behind forensic anthropology in Australia and the United States.